Here comes a new challenger!
Hello and welcome to Not Everyone Is Here, and in this episode we're covering BadGuy and just Guilty Gear in general. After all, it is a very popular franchise, especially right now, with Strive soon to come out, hopefully with not another delay, but, well, only time will tell, won't it? So, Guilty Gear Strive, Guilty Gear is a franchise. It's very prolific, as you might know. It's one of those really niche fighting games when it started off. Anime fighters weren't really the most popular thing back then, though they were played a lot for them to be ported to the West, right? And Guilty Gear was just a marvel of a franchise all the way back then. And even now, I would say Guilty Gear kind of represents the standards that fighting games should strive to go for. Now, I'm not talking about like with all that crazy style, but just having its own unique or styled presentation, you know what I mean? It doesn't have to be super crazy and all the special effects and all these crazy like model movements and all that fun stuff, but really just don't make your fighting game look boring, which is what Guilty Gear avoids doing. It always looks like a visual marvel. Every image of a Guilty Gear game, at least when it comes to 3D ones, really just works as a wallpaper, especially during supers and such. It's just a wallpaper at that point, right? Which is great. The same really applies to fighters, because a lot of what Guilty Gear does was transferred over to fighters. Dragon Ball FighterZ. Dragon Ball is a 2D anime, which when transferred into 3D, they made these models, so when they needed to recreate scenes from the anime in this 3D, they kind of made it so they tried their best to have it be 2D-ish, right? Like, it's still 3D models, but it looks 2D-ish. The same kind of goes with Guilty Gear. For instance, Guilty Gear does this thing where the characters, they kind of act like sprites, right? Because sprites in old fighting games, they didn't really match the lighting of whatever stage they were on. It was all the same sprites, right? The stage could be nighttime and they'd still be super bright, right? The same applied to Guilty Gear. Guilty Gear had these sprites that were, even with the stage itself was like very dark-ish in tone, lighting wouldn't reflect on the characters, right? And in modern Guilty Gear games, they've kept true to that, right? So when they make a character, they have their own unique lighting for that character to make them stand out and pop. There is natural lighting, but it just makes the characters look worse, in my opinion, when I've used it before. So generally having the characters to their own unique lighting is really how it should be. And like I said, Guilty Gear kind of just defines what fighting games stylistically should be nowadays. And so to me, I feel personally that Smash should definitely have a little bit of a Guilty Gear representation. Now, it's not impossible, after all. We do already have River City Ransom Spirits, which is owned by ArcSys. I don't remember if they made the IP, but they do own it, and so they clearly have some form of a relationship with ArcSys to be able to get something from them. And whether it's a spirit or maybe BadGuy is a fighter, who knows, it would be nice to see some representation of Guilty Gear. I think it'd be great. And besides, when it comes to other Arc System Works franchise, the only other notable one you could argue for is BlazBlue, but ultimately, if Sakurai says, hey, I want your company's character, they're more than likely going to BadGuy, obviously, because BadGuy is essentially the mascot of the Guilty Gear series, right? That's just how it is. And personally, I would love to see how, if BadGuy was to make it into Smash as a playable fighter, how they emulate that sort of style that Guilty Gear goes for in Smash, right? Because Smash doesn't really do the whole 2D effect that ArcSys does with Guilty Gear and Dragon Ball. It's sort of like 3D models, like I said, that's meant to mimic 2D sprites, whereas in Smash, it's just 3D models, and they flip it around maybe at best, Sometimes a character will face the camera depending on whether or not they're facing left or right, and sometimes they'll have their back turned to the camera depending on some stuff like that. But you know, when it comes to Ultimate, I would be curious to see how they would represent BadGuy. Probably use like the old game as reference on how his model would look like and all this sort of stuff. But again, I think it'd be very interesting. Hey, that's just me. Let me know your guys' thoughts in the comments below. Do you think Guilty Gear deserves some representation? Me personally, I think it does. After all, like I said, it defines modern day fighting games, and I don't think many people would argue against that. At least when it comes to the visuals. Gameplay wise, I mean, hey, you know, whatever defines fighting games for you, it is your opinion. You know what I mean? So, yeah, with that all being said, I hope you guys enjoyed the video. Please take care of yourselves, and as always, have an amazing rest of your day. Sub, right? Sub, like and sub, comment, you know, boost the analytics. Come on, look. I don't want to be that much of a show, but I kind of need to because YouTube kind of forces my hand. But anyways, peace.
I'm coming through, partner, we can do this right. You're the fire, I'm the wind tonight. Burning dread, haha, that's right, baby, baby, baby.